G'day, my name is Matt Fradd. This is Ascension Presents. Today I want to talk about the true, the good, and the beautiful. We were made for the true, the good, and the beautiful because the true, the good, and the beautiful are God. God doesn't have truth, He is it. He doesn't have beauty, He is beauty. He doesn't have goodness, He is goodness. This is what Aquinas means by divine simplicity. There is no distinction between His being and essence, His substance and accidents. His essence is existence. Now that's massively complicated, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but suffice it to say, all of us long for truth, goodness, and beauty, whether we believe in God or not. Think about it. We desire truth, even if the truth is bad. A policeman comes to your door at 2 in the morning and he says, "I've got some bad news." You don't say, "Oh, if it's bad, I don't want to know it. Go away, go away." You say, "Well, come in," because you want to know the truth even if it's going to hurt. We want things that are beautiful. Now, I don't think beauty is solely in the eye of the beholder. I think it's objective. If you think Beyoncé's music is more beautiful than the Italian composer Puccini, you're objectively wrong, and you might be an idiot, right? Beauty is objective. This is why we have scenic routes. Right? We all kind of agree what is beautiful. And Aquinas has, different things to say on what makes something beautiful. And we all want what's good. If I say there's a restaurant down the road, it's really lousy. Do you want to go? You'd be like, "No, I don't want to go." But if you said it was a good restaurant, well, what's the name of it? I'd love to check it out. We desire what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. That said, I believe, and I think Aristotle would agree, or I would agree with Aristotle, that we can accustom ourselves to things that are less true, less good, less beautiful, or even false, bad, and ugly. Okay? Because we all want happiness. This is something Aristotle talks about in the Nicomachean Ethics. All of us desire happiness, but we don't necessarily agree about that which makes us happy. Okay? So, we never choose anything that we think is bad for us. You've never done it either. You've never chosen something that you thought was bad for you. And if you say to yourself, "That's not true, I've done something that was dangerous or not necessarily good for me," okay, but you did that in order to attain a better good. We always do that. You can't act in a way that's bad for you. I mean, you can act in a way that's bad for you, but you can't knowingly act in a way that will be bad for you. So, to give an example, if you look at pornography, you don't say, "This is really bad for me and that's why I'm looking at it." No. Instead you say, "Well, this will be exciting, this will make me happy, this will give me some relief," and that's why you do it. You seek a good. It's an apparent good, it's not actually an actual good, it's an apparent good, but we always seek the good. So this is my point. Even though we've been made for the true, good, and beautiful, we can end up habituating ourselves to things that are not true, not good, and not beautiful, and then the true, good, and the beautiful actually don't appeal to us the way that they ought to. An example with diet. If you've been raised from a young age on Doritos and Coca-Cola and McDonald's hamburgers and not much else, then the chances that fruits and vegetables will appeal to you, not likely. The chances that you'll enjoy an orange juice the way you ought to over a Coca-Cola, not likely. You've accustomed yourself to things that aren't good for you. And then the things that are good for you, you don't believe them to be goods anymore. Same thing can be true with the spiritual life and the intellectual life. We can accustom ourselves to the drab and the stupid and the dreary, the boring, the ugly, so that the things that then ought to move us don't. So, make your life more true, good, and beautiful. What might that look like? Well, why don't you stop watching Netflix? Why don't I stop watching Netflix? Instead, why don't we read something beautiful? Let me give a couple of suggestions. Tolkien. If you don't think Tolkien is a beautiful writer, you're the problem, not Tolkien. It's sort of like if you go to Mass that's celebrated well, and you don't find it beautiful or interesting, you find it boring, say, it's because you're boring. The problem isn't with the Mass, the problem isn't with Tolkien, the problem isn't with Puccini or Bach's music, the problem's with you, because you've accustomed yourself to ugly things. Stop doing it. I woke up the other morning, 3 in the morning, I woke up, opened up the laptop, and I started watching a Netflix thing. Path of Least Resistance, right? Who wants to read one of those things? What are they called? Books. I started watching this video, and halfway through it occurred to me that it was really quite an ugly movie. And something of a sexual scene began to happen. I thought, no thank you. And I turned it off. And I went into the kitchen, and I began to read Flannery O'Connor's short stories. Now, if you haven't read Flannery O'Connor's short stories, to paraphrase Dr. Peter Kraft, do not die without reading her, okay? Now, if you're not a big reader, this is a bonus for you because they're short stories anyway. A Good Man is Hard to Find is a collection of some of her short stories. Be sure to check that out. You also might read H.G. Wells. He's written some beautiful short stories like The Time Machine. The point is, if Lord of the Rings or The Brothers Karamazov, which I've never finished, but Dostoevsky, if these things appear too big, well, read some smaller things. But begin to habituate yourself to what's actually sophisticated and lovely. Like, if you only listen to ugly techno stuff, stop listening to that music. Start listening to beautiful music. The two things I've suggested in this podcast would be Giacomo Puccini and Johann Sebastian Bach. I think two of the most beautiful composers, and I love listening to them. You might not like listening to them in the beginning, but you should, and you will if you begin to listen to them more and stop listening to junk. I feel like I need to keep making my point because I'm sure I'm offending people. Here's a point. Do you remember that old series 24? With Jack Bauer? I remember my wife and I got so addicted to it because it's so stimulating and, it always leaves you on a cliffhanger. Well, I had watched 2 or 3 of these seasons, Well, one weekend my wife left with the kids to go somewhere and I thought, well, I've got some free time. Why don't I sit down and watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy? Not read the book, watch the trilogy. I got about 2 minutes in and thought, this is so boring, and I stopped it. This is what I'm talking about. Forget the books, I couldn't even watch the movie because I'd become so accustomed to the fast pace, cliffhanger, stimulating 24. So, a couple of suggestions for you. Begin to read books, turn off Netflix. Stop numbing out on YouTube. It's not doing anything good for you. Don't even listen to podcasts or watch videos like this. It's ironic, I know that I'm coming to you through YouTube maybe. Stop watching it. Go listen to something beautiful. Start listening to beautiful music and stop listening to ugly music. And finally, start to become comfortable with silence. Believe me, I'm preaching to me as much as I'm preaching to you. I said this in a recent video. You don't like you for the same reason I don't like me. That we have this sort of internal battle going on within us, and we find it difficult to be alone with ourselves. But over time, we can become at peace with God and therefore at peace with ourselves, and it's a lot more easy to do that. So, when you go on a drive, don't play music maybe. Don't listen to a podcast. Be with yourself. Spend some time in holy adoration, right? Eucharistic adoration. Be alone with yourself. Don't listen to things or watch TV as you go to bed at night. Be alone with yourself. Don't, subject your poor children to having to watch things and listen to things as they go to bed at night. Allow them to be with themselves, to be comfortable with silence. Now, quiet is different than silence. I think that most often, quiet is a prerequisite for silence, not always, but that silence is something different. It's not an absence, it's a fullness that allows us to be in communion with God and ourself. And that communion with ourself is what we call the interior life. And this is something that bad, false, and ugly things begin to suffocate. So, begin to habituate yourself to the true, the good, and the beautiful. And let us know below in the comment section how you plan on doing that. If you have a question for me, just write #AskMattFrad and I'll respond to it in an upcoming episode. And if you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you can follow me @MattFrad. Thanks so much.